Hey, this is Scott, and today we're going to take a very quick look at the build and design of this lens, the Tamron 70-210mm f4 VC. I will of course be taking a more in-depth look at the image quality and the overall usability and make another 1 or 2 videos talking about that, but for today we're just going to take a very basic and quick look at this. So just taking a look at some of the basic specs. This is, as I said, a 210mm lens on the long end, which is 10mm longer than a lot of the others in this category. And it does actually seem to be a bit longer. I did try and compare it very quickly to my Canon 70-200 f2.8 IS Mark II. And the long end does seem to be a bit longer, so it's not just compensating for focus breathing or anything like that, as far as I can tell. I will do more testing. As I said, the maximum aperture on here is f4, has a very close focus distance of under 1 meter, giving you a maximum magnification ratio of 1 to 3.1, which is actually very, very good, especially in this class of lenses. The filter size is a fairly small 67mm, and it weighs only 860 grams, which is very noticeable when you hold it next to one of the other 2.8 options. It has 20 elements in 14 groups, and 3 of those are low dispersion elements that are supposed to help with chromatic aberrations while you're shooting and get really sharp images from corner to corner. Again, we're going to take a look at that in more depth very soon. And there are 9 aperture blades, which they say should give you a very nice soft out of focus area, or bokeh. So just to give you some idea of the overall size here, this is the Canon 70-200 f2.8 IS Mark II right next to it, and you can see it is fairly smaller both in width, and the length is also a little bit shorter even without the lens hood, but of course including the lens hood it's significantly shorter. I can't really show you on camera, but the weight difference here is also very, very noticeable. So also, as you can see, compared to the Canon, the zoom rings and the focus rings have been switched. So the zoom on the Tamron is out in the front while the focus ring is in the back, and also the direction of these rings have been switched. So that way, for example, on the Tamron, all the way in this kind of rightmost position is the widest 70mm, and on the Canon, all the way in this widest right position is 200mm. So when you're zooming out or zooming in, it's going to be in the opposite direction if you're used to the typical Canon way. So moving on and starting at the back of the lens, you can see, of course, you do get Tamron's newer lens cap, which flares out and kind of covers the weather sealing gasket here at the rear of the lens. And that weather sealing gasket is another indication that, yes, this is a weather resistant or moisture resistant lens. And you can see this rear element here is recessed inside of the barrel, but it does not move when you zoom in or out, and so there is no exposed guts inside of the lens. So next up is this tripod foot, and this is an optional accessory, so you don't have to get it, especially if you're going to be hand holding this most of the time. I don't think it's incredibly necessary. This lens is pretty light and fairly small for its class, but if you're going to be using it on a tripod a lot, this is really nice to have, especially because it has this built-in Arca Swiss compatible foot. So if you're using a tripod with Arca Swiss style plates, it's really easy. You don't have to put anything additional on here. But of course, if you want to, if you use Manfrotto plates or something like that, you can attach tripod plates on the bottom of here as usual. It's also nice that this is a hinge style foot. So that means that if you have this attached to the camera and you want to remove it, you can just open it up like a hinge, and you don't have to actually remove the lens to slide this off the back like you do have to with some of the other lenses, including Tamron's own 70-200 f2.8 G2, as well as Canon's 70-200 f2.8. You have to actually slide that ring off the back, which means you have to remove it from the camera when you want to take it off. On the side here, you do also, of course, get 2 switches, one for your autofocus on and off, and one for your VC. And in this case, you have only on and off for the VC, no additional modes like you do have on some of the 2.8 versions. Tamron claims that this is a 4-stop vibration compensation, so I will be testing that, of course. But also I will be testing just how much of an issue these switches design happens to be. If you've seen my other videos on some of the other Tamron lenses, like the 70-200 f2.8 G2, then you'll know that these could be kind of a problem when you're carrying this on a strap on your side, and the relatively square design is easy to get caught on your belt or on your pants as it's swinging and automatically switch on or off. It's been an annoyance in the past, but I've also found that it depends on kind of how far from the camera body these switches are. Like on the 24-70 G2 lens, it's not as much of a problem because of just the relation to the body of the camera and how they don't physically tend to end up brushing against your leg quite as much as on the 70-200 f2.8. So we'll see how much of an issue it is here, and I will be talking about that in my final video. So as I said, the zoom and focus rings on here are switched both in position and in the direction that they turn compared to the Canon lenses. And the general quality feels okay. The rubber on here is just fine. The zoom ring doesn't really have any play. There's a reasonable amount of focus throw, but I don't think anybody's really going to be relying on the manual focus of this lens too much, so I don't think it should be a problem. And generally, you know, the smoothness of them is okay. It's definitely not up to the level of the 2.8 versions, but comparing the price of this lens to what you're actually getting here in terms of build quality, I think these are more than enough. And the overall build of this lens, the material, the general feel of the build quality, the toughness, does feel to be pretty much on par with the 2.8 version from Tamron, the G2 version, which was very, very nice. So you're basically getting just a junior version of that lens in a lot of ways. Moving further up the lens, you've got the lens hood here, which is a kind of pedal style lens hood. And it is flat over here, so that means you could basically put this down on a table and not have to worry about it falling over like when you're changing lenses. And it's relatively compact. It feels nice in terms of the plastic. It's pretty much what you'd expect. And it's very compact, so that means like when you reverse the lens hood, it's not going to be, you know, overly large. It doesn't take up any additional space in your bag compared to some of the 2.8 versions, which have really large lens hoods that may or may not affect whether or not you bring them sometimes, just because you might not have the space in your bag. But this really doesn't take up any additional space. It's pretty much right along the same size, the same width of the barrel of the lens. So that's really nice in terms of portability and practicality. The lens cap is once again the newer design from Tamron, which has the really, really nice deep pinches here. Very, very easy to use. Very nice lens cap. And again, you get the 67mm front filter thread here, which is fairly small. So filters for this won't be too expensive, which is pretty nice. Again, I'm not sure of exactly what coatings they have on this front lens. They don't really advertise it like they do for the 2.8 lens with their B-bar and their fluorine coating and stuff. I'm not sure what's on here. This is an entirely internally zooming lens, which means that nothing extends while you're zooming it. But if you are one of those people that does keep the lens hood reversed while you're using your lens, it does block most of the zoom ring because the zoom ring is on the outside now. So it's going to be very, very difficult or impossible to zoom the lens with the lens hood in this position. So you'll either want to take it off or reverse it to the standard position before you're using this lens, so that way you have the ability to actually zoom it in and out. So in terms of build quality and design, that's pretty much all she wrote. It's small, compact, especially compared to the 2.8 versions. It is very good quality. The only thing that felt a little bit less quality than the much more expensive 2.8 versions is the smoothness of the zoom ring and the focus ring. But even that is definitely not bad. Overall, this feels very, very nicely made. The materials are very nice. The optical quality I will be testing very soon, and that's going to be, of course, a big determining factor. Whether this is the right choice for you, or you want to save up for the 2.8 version, or if the Canon version might be a better option. So if you want to see any of those tests, be sure to stick around, subscribe if you want to get alerts of those new videos when they're posted. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And as always, thank you for watching.